art and math guide us down this path. Historical tales come alive, where science and stories dive. Blended facts with heart, knowledge from the start. Meet rich blues we sing, to the future memory. Health and science in the mix, Meebridge got the fix. Complex subjects make
right
clear
now
every episode
in ways that we actually acquire knowledge
leads the way,
and ways that make me more efficient.
in the world of digital streams, turning knowledge into dreams. Through the tales of old, new stories unfold.
Thank you so much for joining with me. It is truly an honor and a privilege.
MedBix Webcast is a new kind of healthcare media channel to break the silo mentality and foster interdisciplinary thinking. Our mission is to fill that gap and to create a curiosity through different lenses, tapping the passion that guided the historical figures in medicine and bringing present-day groundbreaking research to the front lines. We interview physicians and leaders in the industry about present-day healthcare challenges on our live programming.
Hey, welcome to the MedBix Webcast. This is Raman Raju. I'm the host. You know, the reason I started this channel because I wanted to educate, some, innovations. A lot of innovation is going on in the healthcare. We need it, actually. We need innovation, in the healthcare because of the American healthcare system is a paradox. More you spend, less care you're getting it. So we need solutions, innovative solutions. So to get innovative solutions, just the medicine point of view is not enough. I think that you need to have a little bit exposure to the doctors, you need to have exposure to mathematics, a little bit of physics, a little bit of art and psychology. All these things are part of that innovative platform. I think if they can participate and understand, it's much difficult for IT guys, software guys, think about medicine. Rather than medicine, people can learn the basic sciences of physics or mathematics or philosophy or psychology. So I think this channel, that's what I do. I interview doctors who bring a different perspectives. That's what my goal is for this channel. But anyway, that the artificial intelligence, everybody talks about artificial intelligence here, including the Uber drivers to all everywhere, top to CEO to everybody to the bottom in Silicon Valley. I don't know everybody knows exactly what that means. Artificial intelligence is a really what we don't know. It's still the architect of the artificial intelligence don't know what that is. It is a very emergent property that is some extent. So the doctors are embracing some of them are nervous about it, some of them are scared, all kinds of people there in the medical world, healthcare world. But there is a doctor who does both. He has is joining from Iowa City, Iowa. Iowa City, I made a joke about it. They said that all the AI roads are going to end in Iowa City. He's saying that Iowa City is a progressive city. It is going to be, we are going to make changes in AI. We're going to be implementing AI there, So it's a very enthusiastic about AI in the Iowa City coming there to the healthcare system. That is Dr. Kenneth Nepple is coming from joining from Iowa City. He is a urological surgeon. He is a surgical urologist, and he is kidney stones, in the same gamut, urinary tract infections and cancer removals and tumor removals, all those things. So he's joining us from the Iowa City. So let me bring him to the table and we'll ask him just a little bit about his background. Hey, welcome to the MedBix Webcast, Dr. Kenneth Nepple. Tell us a little bit about your background, a little bit.
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to talk with you. And so, for background, I'm an Iowa native. Grew up in Templeton, Iowa, all of 300 people in the western part of the state. Funny you mentioned psychology. I was actually a psychology undergraduate at Iowa State University, along with a biology or a minor. And I went to medical school here, University of Iowa, and then stayed here for urology residency. Went down to Wash U in St. Louis and did a cancer fellowship, doing open surgery, but a lot of robotic surgery for 2 years, and then came back and joined faculty, which would have been about 13 years ago. And so, as far as my sort of informatics origin story, there was a mentor I had in St. Louis who was pretty forward thinking. He kind of figured out the way that we close kidneys when we do robotic, partial nephrectomies. And he would tell me, hey, don't just be the robotic partial guy. Everybody's going to have a surgeon who can do that. You've got to kind of look and say, where else can you, contribute? And so, was in practice here for a couple of years and had one of the IT guys, IT people in my office, and we were talking about our EHR, which happened to be Epic here, and maybe some of the challenges we see as or I personally see as a physician in it. And he said, hey, we could fix, some of this. And so we had the ability to kind of redesign the Epic, widescreen navigator. And he was sort of the Steve Jobs Apple type of guy, and kind of made the workflow better. And then from that got exposure to our informatics group. And at that point, it was interesting because I remember contacting my mentor and asking if informatics is a thing, like he talked about, keep an eye open, for a thing that might be an opportunity. And so it's a, very silly question now, but, had communicated with him and said, hey, is informatics going to be something in the future? And he's like, oh yeah, of course. And so I started working with our informatics group here, and have been doing that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Technology issues. Yeah.
No issues. So that was my sort of first insight and then experience over time with informatics.
Let me ask you, you said that the informatics means the electronic medical records, right? So what is your experience? A lot of doctors complain about it. So I'm not seeing the patient. I'm watching the screen. There was a lot of complaints, and that one of the reasons is that the Dr. Robert Pearl says that the EMR, the success of EMR, the failure of EMR reason is that is designed for reimbursements rather than helping the doctors and patients. Tell us your take on that thing. Because you are very interested in the electronic medical records and informatics.
Yeah, I think from my perspective over time, I've realized you can have exactly two contrarian views about something and have them both be true. And so I think I have like a love and then maybe not so much love, experience with the EHR. When I'd started in medicine, so we're going back to around 2000, we had an internal built system. It worked okay, but I'm the last sort of generation to write on paper and realize some of the challenges of doctors' handwriting. We went live with Epic in 2008. Here when I was a resident, and there are always some onboarding issues, but there were orders that for a little while that day were being written and then they would disappear. And so I remember looking over at one of my colleague residents who'd rewritten the same, pediatric admission order set for 3 times in a row. And you could kind of see like a little tear like stream down his face for real. And so, I think that it's a challenge. I think that somebody will say, hey, oh, these are systems that were designed for billing. But I think when I remember how things were at that time, there weren't a lot of physicians that were asking for a seat at the table. And so I think in hindsight, maybe we as doctors say we weren't invited to the table, but I think it's that, people just weren't really involved. And I think partly because you didn't realize that you had some control in the system, and that you could make things better. And that the thought was, oh, this is just like a, computer program that we download and that's all we have. And so my personal experience, and John Gravel was the guy who came into my office and said, hey, we can fix some of this stuff. And we were working in a little corner, of Epic that nobody else was hanging out in at that time. And so we could build some stuff. And I remember being in clinic and being like, I don't like how this screen, looks. And so I'd messaged, John, hope he's long gone. He subsequently went on to go to medical school and now is in practice. But, at that time, I could message him and say, hey, can we fix this? And he could sort of write the code and then on the fly, push something into the system. And so it's that control, I think, that really empowers physicians. And as we, transition, and we'll talk about our, sort of AI experience here, but I think that we're recapturing maybe the ability to control, some more of our day of how we interact and use the system, potentially to leverage our own, creativity and innovation in patient care instead of having maybe in the past some tools that kind of stifled that. And so I think that that customization in control are really potentially what are driving physicians to be very interested in what's going on in the evolution of systems now.
Yeah, I remember Epic came from a very solid database. They have a huge database from VA hospital systems. So that's why it was one of the best ones, because it is rich with the data. It's a very that's the first one, had a lot of data supporting the whole process. I took a classes there in Epic, Mumps language. That's written in the long time ago in the Vista. It's called Vista in the Epic system. Basically, they came from there. And then Judith, I think that lady, I saw her we were taking classes same time, but she developed quite a bit after that, and it became a very powerful force. But let me ask you, so the now you moved on to so let us talk about a little bit before we go into the artificial intelligence. I want to ask you the advances in urology, surgical urology. For example, when I was in the 1980s, 90s, I was selling ultrasounds and I was doing ultrasound. Oh, lithroscopy came in. Everybody is talking about it. So tell us, what are the advances going on in the urology and urological surgeries?
Yeah, I have a classic slide that I always show, especially when I'm amongst urologists, that basically say, urologist is a surgeon who loves technology. That's probably true of everything now. But I think one of the things that drew me to the field is we use a lot of advanced imaging. And so, we use a ton of MRI, ultrasound, CT in our practice on a regular basis. We use a ton of scopes. And so, we do robotic surgery, but we're also looking into ureters, looking into kidneys, looking into bladders all the time. And I think, especially in the robotic surgery world, have kind of pushed the boundaries, in initially laparoscopic surgery and now robotic surgery. So I can think back to my earlier career, having trained with doing open prostatectomy, in with an experienced surgeon who had done over 2,500 cases. Still, about 1/4 of the time, you're like, we may need to give this patient a blood transfusion even though they're healthy, they have good anatomy, because we're working to spare nerves or working not to use cautery. And so that was a surgery that was pretty high complexity. Well, fast forward over time, there was a transition there where now almost all of us do it predominantly robotically. I think in 13 years, I've transfused one patient, and we've looked at our institutional data, and we've gone 6 months, a year or longer, and not giving any transfusions. And so there was a lot of debate in the urology world about the value of that. I think actually initially robotic surgery helped push forward, things like care plans that are used on the open side to get people out of the hospital, and things like not using opioids. We're sort of implemented to try to help patients get out of the hospital faster. And so in the urology world, there's a lot going on surgically. There's a lot going on, with radiology. And then there's also a lot going on even with things like, pathology advancements. And rather than having, a single score for something based on the pathologist's eyes, well, now we're getting different information from pathology that we didn't have available. And so, I think urology is trying to help to lead the field, at least on the surgical side, on the cancer side, with saying, well, what can we do to make both the lives of our patients better and us as providers, kind of experience, things better for both patients and providers.
So I was stuck with the one great point when I was talking with you on the phone few days ago. You said that something, you embrace like robotic surgery, just like the comparison you're doing with embracing the AI. So tell us that comparison you're doing. That I was fascinated by that.
Yeah, when we were talking, I think the day before, finished some operations, and then kind of look back and say, well, what we were doing surgically, 15 years ago, we're making huge incisions, we're losing blood, and we thought we were absolutely doing the right thing for patients. And I think overall we probably were. But, as time advanced, we now look back and say, oh, it's kind of silly that we made those big incisions and lost that much blood and maybe operated on some patients, or for sure operated on some patients that probably didn't need to be operated on and could be surveyed. And so, it kind of pops up in my head, are we going to look back at how we're practicing medicine, recently, in the time spent, like looking through the chart, finding all the information that's buried. It used to be buried in a stack of 100 papers, and you'd flip through all the papers while you flip through the, actual copies of the films, and tried to find information. Well, now we do the same thing, or have done in the past the same thing with the electronic version. You basically took all the paper information and scanned it into the chart. And so as we develop some tools, are we going to look back and say, hey, it was really crazy how we used to practice medicine? We'd spend a half hour looking through the chart for the 10 things that were important, rather than having, some tools that helped. And so I think that's always, it's always easy to look back. That's one of my hobbies now, is I like, when I'm mowing the lawn, I'll have a book on on tape or whatever, through my phone, and I listen to like 5 and 10 and 15-year-old books about innovation, because it makes me feel like I'm a genius, because I know how everything ended up. And so we kind of start to get that feeling as we get experience with some tools that we have in the system, is things may be able to evolve at a much more rapid pace. What took the last 10 years to develop in the electronic health record, maybe that happens much more quickly once we have more of us that are able to make some changes in the system, and sort of customize the system to meet our needs.
One of the prominent cancer is just a very significant one, is a prostate cancer. So, one of the things surprising me, Dr. Kenneth, you can tell me about the analytics, like Atera AI, is that analytics become a diagnostic tool for measuring the prostate cancer screening. That is a surprise. A mathematical tool became a very central role in designing, screening the. Tell us a little bit about that, and how that is very interesting in the urology side.
Yeah, I have kind of my standard, discussion that I have with prostate cancer patients, and I'm actually a big iPad guy. I bring an iPad in with me every patient I see, and I use the Epic version of the iPad, and I've got my little colored pencils, or pens, and so I tell everyone, prostate cancer exists on a spectrum, and then I kind of draw out, there's low, there's intermediate, there's high risk, and so it can go from cancer that certainly doesn't need to be treated to something that's incredibly, life threatening. And so in the past, we've had kind of limited information to be able to stratify patients into different risk groups. It was based on their PSA, blood tests. So that protein test is sort of controversial, but it tells us something about prostate cancer. But things are largely driven based on the biopsy, and the pathologist, looking at the slides and saying, does this look like this low risk or intermediate or high risk? And so over time, what we've had develop as far as tools is we use MRI very frequently to kind of get additional, almost like pathologic information without cutting the patient about the extent of disease. But then from the biopsy specimen, rather than just getting a number, if you look at what the Artera AI group developed, is they said, hey, let's take a digital image of the prostate cancer slide, and let's train that image based on patient outcomes. And they had access to clinical trials and collaborated with people who had run clinical trials, where they had a combination of the pathology slides still available, and they had outcomes 10 years out from treatment. And so what they did was, in training that algorithm, it can give a score that's kind of along that same spectrum, but it isn't dependent on what the PSA is or what the pathologist called the slide. And the interesting thing when you talk to that group about the information is, it's not only looking at the prostate cancer cells, it's looking at the surrounding cells that don't have cancer, in what we kind of call the microenvironment. And so we have a bunch of brilliant PhDs here, and I'd heard basic science researchers talk about the microenvironment that surrounds prostate cancer. or different cancer cells. It's kind of that seed in the soil, paradigm. But I hadn't seen that in clinical practice, and so it turns out that this score is actually based not just on the cancer, but that microenvironment. And so now, where I'll tell people, and all this is rapidly developing. In February, I saw a webinar. I said, this looks interesting. It's part in the NCCN guidelines, and then went to clinic and said, hey, are there any patients that are interested in getting some more information from their prior biopsies? And so then what I have come to the realization is, in the past, if we have 100 men with low risk prostate cancer, it's like they're all kind of bundled up in one group, and I can't tell one from the other. What this score gives us is actually will give a percentile score. So, I was in clinic today, and there was one patient that was second percentile. There was another that was 66th percentile, another that was 89th percentile. And so rather than having that circle of men, you can kind of picture putting them in a line. And then if okay, within that low risk, it's a little higher, a little bit more or less, kind of risky situation about watching versus treating, that's additional information. So I've just had patients be really, really receptive to the concept of, hey, you already went through this biopsy, which it's a short procedure. It's a 10-minute deal, but it's a much bigger deal for patients than it is for urologists. And they are more than willing to say, hey, can we get some information from the prior biopsy and try to make a more informed, decision about that. And so Artera is part of that. And then, there's other tests that'll actually look, like Decipher's the test that looks at gene expression from the actual prostate cancer cells from a prostate biopsy. And so now, rather than just having a number that I look at and using a risk group, I can actually, say, okay, this patient is this risk group, but I have this additional information, and it kind of weighs into our decision making, because what we've known forever is that not all of those patients that are in that same risk group are going to have the same outcome. Some may have an amazing outcome, and other may be potentially, destined to fail. Because of variability within that risk group. And so it's something that is now on a daily basis in clinic is coming into our decision making and sort of trying to gather the best available information so that we can share that with the patient, explain it to them in ways that make sense, and then help that to guide the decision that they make about their treatment.
So it's clearly useful for you. Artera AI is giving you additional information, classify the patients in the risk group. That is valuable for you, or there is saving cost for you. Are there any? Can you see saving cost? Let me ask you first. Before that, even saving cost. I saw your post. One of the posts, you said that you're complaining about the reimbursements. They're denying reimbursements. All these people. Who is going to pay for these AI tools? And then, are you saving money? If you're really saving money on for the because of the tool, why it's kind of a insurance companies are lending the payers, or is it still is under the transition right now?
Yeah, I'm no health economics, expert. I just learn about some of this stuff and think about some of this stuff as a hobby. But perfect example, actually, from clinic today, is it was a man with high risk prostate cancer, and he was getting, he got a PET scan. Luckily, there was no evidence of disease elsewhere. We said, hey, this is favorable. He was an older guy, and we said, hey, we'll do radiation. We have data that you should get a medication called androgen deprivation therapy, and more data that you should get this other medication called abiraterone. And so in your head, you're still, though, like, okay, this patient is still potentially going to have a pretty negative long-term outcome just because of the aggressiveness of the disease. And so he was actually one of the first patients that I did the test on, and we got the result back, and he was in the second percentile on the favorable side. So, we were able to talk about, hey, actually, even though he told me everything I've gotten to date has been like bad news, like, oh, this is really aggressive. It was the first thing, the PET scan was the first thing, but the second thing that was like, hey, this is actually, quite favorable. In the interesting thing then is at the recent ASCO, so American Society of Clinical Oncologists, Artera had done some additional testing based on a clinical trial and said, okay, in patients with this high risk disease, there are some that may not need this additional medication called abiraterone. And so the test can actually tell you who doesn't need this additional medication as much. And so there's a potential cost savings, which I'm not even going to quote a number, but I'm sure it's in the 5 digits of what abiraterone costs, in a year. And so saw that patient back today, and he's seeing the medical oncologist too. But we talked about this test and how potentially it may allow de-escalation, which would also be less costly, for the patient, and potentially could help to avoid what, side effect that he could be having from the medication. So I think there are some situations like that very explicitly, may guide care. I think there's also just a part of, like, the chart is so big that you may not actually know what's going on and is going on for the patient before. And so if there's a tool that can look
No,
within the
yeah.
chart,
Just
then
excuse me,
you'll have
because
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead.
excuse me before we go into the notes part of it. So,
Sure.
but I wanted to ask you a question about that Atera MD. Right now, Atera AI is not reimbursable right now, right? It's not.
Oh,
You're,
it's very much reimbursable. And
it's
so
very much reimbursable. Very good.
so they were able to basically show validation by use of these clinical trials, and so they're part of the NCCN, National Comprehensive Cancer Network. They're in the guidelines, and so most of the time now, when testing works its way into the guidelines, then it's reimbursed. And so I've been using it for about 5 months, 6 months, and I haven't seen any issues because it's part of the guidelines. And actually, compared to some other tests that are done from prostate biopsies, it actually has a lower, price point than some of the other testing. So, yeah,
That,
that's the nice thing is I can tell a patient, hey, this is some additional information we can gather from your prior biopsy. There's the cost to it, but because it's part of these guidelines, it's generally been reimbursed, by insurance. And I think they have a system in place to where if it wasn't reimbursed, then there's some conversation with the provider and the patient about whether to do the testing. But my experience to date has not, that conversation has actually never had to come up.
Fantastic, as they're reimbursing. So, but yeah, that's a clinical side. It helps you clinical side of it. Administrative side, your time, that notes that is you're talking about that. Let us talk about that a little bit. Do you see actually the AI giving you this free time a little bit, summarizing these huge number of pages and pages of reports? Is it summarizing very well for you? And do you feel that comfortable enough to take that summary serious?
Yeah, and I think for brief history, go to about a year ago. Previous to that, one of my residents had shown me, ChatGPT. I played around with it a little bit, but I actually wasn't that interested in AI. It wasn't until we had access to some tools, and so University of Iowa, we ended up turning on 2 tools at the same time. One is ambient transcription, and so you hear a lot about
Yeah.
that. A lot of other places have that in place, and so we use a vendor called Nabla. But then there's another technology that's AI powered chart abstraction, and so the group we work with is called Evidently. And so our system basically piloted those 2 technologies, said, hey, it looks like there's some promise about what these could do. I was on the pilot group for the chart abstraction, and so got to experience the situation where, I don't know exactly how it works, but it works where the AI can look at the whole chart. And you keep in mind, for those that aren't medical professionals, you think, oh, all the information's in the chart, but there's really kind of data that's siloed. There's the usual EHR data, but there's also information that's in health information exchanges. Or there's scanned or sometimes faxed documents that
Excellent.
reside in, yeah, we still use, faxes. So all those, when you're seeing a patient, you may have to go into the multiple different areas, look through multiple different files, and find the information you need. And so what the chart abstraction is able to do is to pull that information together and present it really on one summary screen. And so when I first started using the tool, what I also realized is it's not just the tool; it's the team behind the scenes. And so, I was like my daughter's volleyball game was working in between her games on my laptop, and I realized, oh, there's one piece of information that's missing here, and I hit the little feedback button. And sure enough, I got an email back like 20 minutes later from somebody. I thought they had a bot that was like, managing their questions and providing feedback, but ended up interacting with the person who was messaging, and thought, well, they have their engineers working the weekends. And well, what do I find out down the road? It's not the engineer; it's the co-founder of the company who has a PhD in does AI and has worked in other spaces and has moved into healthcare, and was caring enough to interact with me to say, hey, where's this little blind spot? And then could say, oh, we see why this connection of data wasn't available. We can fix that going forward for the University of Iowa, not just for you. And so for me, it was sort of starting to have that interaction with the tool, but also with the team. And so when our group got together, the CMIO, kind of said, hey, what do people think about this? And so I started to talk about my experience where, hey, the information's easier to get. This team has been really good to work with. And I think came out on the very positive side of what the tool was providing, but then also what it could provide in the future. And so the CMIO kind of looked at me funny, and he said, Ken, like, you don't like anything, like you hate everything that we pull that's new, because there's all these problems. And he said that, you're the resident skeptic amongst our group. If you like this, then that's a good sign, And so then, I think over time, it's realizing that you can figure out like what's a problem. And so it's a problem that, hey, physicians don't like to type in the system. They'd rather have, something else listen and do the scribing, the transcription for them. And also, that is very inefficient use of people's time to go and search for documents. And so I'm very kind of obsessive compulsive about my patients, and figuring out what surgery they need and their medical history, because a lot of my patients are older, where I was spending a lot of time like deep diving into the chart, even after our resident had already looked through it, or maybe our PA had, and spending a lot of my time to do that. And so what I realized was, hey, this tool actually makes life easier to find that information, and it makes especially new patient visits easier, and simple things like, I'd like to see all this patient's labs, no matter what the source is, on one page. I'd like to see all this patient's imaging reports on one page. And so just the ability of the tool to pull that together really improved efficiency to the extent where I'm like, hey, why don't we just add more patients to clinic, because each individual experience is actually taking less time to sort of prep yourself with the information need to have the discussion. And so if you shorten that prep time, it kind of maximizes or increases the amount of face-to-face time you have with the patient. And so, I don't like using phrases like, the joy of medicine. Like for me, it was easier. It still doesn't make medicine easy, because these are complex situations, complex patients. But if there's a tool that can incrementally make something easier, and kind of quickly, you could see how it went from good to better, to potentially, and bordering on a great tool, or you can at least see the promise of what could be a great tool. It really was kind of a game changer in my practice. And so I went from a year ago not really caring about AI to like the last year realizing, like, after a while, like, oh, if I become a good prompt engineer, I didn't even know what that was, in the past. But if I can figure out how to write a good prompt, well, I can use that repeatedly, to gather information on a patient. And so you get into this, like, sort of feels a little creative, a little innovative, but then also is just easier, and it's better for patients, it's better for the provider. And then you start to look at, there are abilities to do research in this space. If you have a tool that's better at gathering data, there are just a world of sort of possibilities. And so I think if you, oh yeah, just to close that statement, you said, well, does it free up free up your time, and I think that's true. And then what I think it's good that people don't need to dictate is, well, if physicians free up their time, what do they do? Some of them may see more patients, some of them may do more surgeries. I think that was the case for me. Some of them may decide they want to spend more time with their families at home. I think that also was the case for me.
You're
And
watching
some of
the
them,
basketball game with your daughter. That's a
yeah,
big
yeah.
plus, right?
Yeah, and then some of it, people may want to use it for research. And I think, I went from, doing some research, and we published some things to really being able to apply for grants in the AI space and be successful, just because we have access to a tool that a lot of places don't have yet.
Yeah, Doug, you did talk about. I'm going to bring you on the side. You're talking about prompt engineering. Just I want to talk with you about that a little bit. Prompt engineering means asking the right questions. I saw one of your video, just a short video of yours. You said that very interesting. It caught my eye. Is that if I know about patient, about his disease and everything, that's not enough. If patient doesn't know about it, if patient has to know, that means communication. That is means information is a book. Information has no meaning. It is only one-sided. That is, you made an excellent point there. I'm going to talk about that in 10, 15 minutes about that. That is about that information inside. That is a Dr. Ken Nepple, and Dr. is joining from Iowa City. He is a very pro AI and pro EMR, and really is showing all the positive side of the technology. Let me say you, information is a physical. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and then you can jump in anytime, Doctor. You're free to jump in anything. That I want to tell you something about information. That information means it refers to a data in a technical sense that is organized and processed to convey meaning. That's what Dr. Kenneth Nepple was telling, is that the patient does if patient doesn't understand it, has that information is not information. That what he said. So that is, I'm going to talk about the information is something very strange concept connected with the in physics, is called entropy. Very important for doctors to understand entropy concept. So I'm going to put a video a little bit. Let me I'm going to bring a video just explain to you what that concept of entropy is. Just that's let me add this one. Sorry about that. Yeah, yeah. Hello, my name is Ramana Annamaraju. I'm going to introduce you to one of the most enigmatic and elusive concepts in the entire field of science from my book, Science is Not a Subject, Science Must Be a Lifestyle. The concept is called entropy. I'm focusing on one aspect of entropy related to information and its connection with the present day healthcare challenges. Entropy is like a ghost, but it is a mean one. You don't see it, you cannot talk to it, it never leaves you, it threatens your job, it tries to destroy your health, it affects your performance, it follows you wherever you go and whatever you do. You feel and see only its destruction. It is not your competitor you need to worry. You need to worry about this elusive ghost. It is your enemy number one. Please pay attention. It makes a difference in your career, in your job, and your duties. If you are a policymaker, you have to understand the impact of money and the economy of your citizens. If you are the CEO of a healthcare system, you have to be concerned about access and equity for all your members. And if you are a software engineer, you need to analyze simplicity versus complexity with your user experience design. As I mentioned before, entropy is your number one enemy. It is true what they say, know your enemy first, then you can come up with a strategy to deal with it. We need to start with the question how much you know and how much you don't know about a system you're working on. This is not some philosophical or a new age question. You have to quantify with the numbers. It is a scientific question to the core. The answer is not that easy. Fortunately, there was a guy smarter than all of us
gave a stunning insight. His name is Ludwig Boltzmann, an Austrian physicist, lived in the latter part of 1800s, came up with a statistical formula for known versus unknown. It is not just a formula, it is a law, second law of thermodynamics. In urban slang, we call it as a law of entropy. The law is not limited to known versus unknown, it is present everywhere, materials and processes and even life itself. Entropy is a true measure of your ignorance of a system. You may say, I don't know a lot of things, but I know what I know, and what I don't know, I don't know. This statement may seem right before you know about the law of entropy. The law of entropy says the unknown does not sit idle. It is constantly attacking your known systems. Entropy wants you to become ignorant and leaves you in constant confusion. It creates a chaos, your understanding of any system dwindling every day by law of entropy. Only way out is to fight it. Entropy is a tough concept to comprehend. I will do my best here with a simple example. You see a picture of a teacup with the 2 sugar cubes in the bottom, and the top teacup is mixed with the sugar. Adding 2 cubes of sugar makes you happier, but your happiness does not come for free. I know sugar prices are going up. Still worse, the law of entropy says your ignorance is also going up. You have known knowledge that there are 2 sugar cubes. Since you know something makes the bottom cup low entropy state. Now, when you mix the sugar, you turn the simple system into a complex system. Even if I ask you, you cannot get sugar cubes back. Sugar is melted away and you lost all the information about the sugar cubes. The irreversibility of the process increases the state of entropy. In a split second, you made the top cup in a higher entropy state. Known system became an unknown. Just it applies to a teacup, this irreversibility is evident everywhere and everything you do. A simple realization that if you create a process for your company with some data variables, the complexity slowly seeps in. It means you lost control of your process and the information becomes chaotic. But if you keep tabs on what it takes to reverse the process to the initial state, it saves you time, money and energy. You are keeping the ghost of entropy at bay. Life itself is a low entropy system. Zoom in or zoom out, your cells to your entire body do hand-to-hand combat with the law of entropy to keep you healthy and alive. Your number one enemy is waiting at outskirts of your life and your company. Boltzmann revealed this book of knowledge and wisdom about the universe with his famous equation. He could not convince his peers about his theory. Later, Boltzmann committed suicide, and his famous formula was written on his tombstone. Devil also, like numbers. Chaos may be its nickname, but it is speaking the nature's language, that is mathematics. Cancer is cellular chaos. There is no diagnostic equipment can measure the exact progression, but with the entropy algorithms, you can extract patterns from seemingly chaotic information. One such algorithm came from an unrelated field, football. Yes, game of soccer. Soccer fanatics wanted to know who is going to win the World Cup that is being held every 4 years. The fans include a number of scientists. They created an algorithm called World Cup optimization algorithm. I don't know how much it is useful in predicting the World Cup winner, but it is helping to detect and predict the progression of cancer. They are testing with the cancer of melanoma and breast cancer. Boltzmann gave the formula for entropy, but a brilliant mathematician and engineer at the Bell Labs, which became AT&T now, gave a different twist to the concept of entropy. His name is Claude Elwood Shannon. The theory bears his name. It is called a Shannon entropy. According to Shannon, the information is central to all processes.
Which I think he's very widely known for, is this notion of a fundamental limit. No matter what you do, as long as you're working with a certain amount of bandwidth, and as long as you're dealing with signals that are only so strong in the face of noise that you confront, no matter what you do, you cannot transmit more than a certain rate.
Here is one remarkable example how you can employ Shannon entropy to healthcare equity and access. The world of medicine made a huge progress in diagnostics and treatments, but healthcare delivery systems are not. A significant number of people on the planet don't see those benefits. Health inequities you can witness in rural and urban America's landscape, and worse, everywhere else. Health delivery system is riddled with complexities. It may be partially political, but it is also filled with logistical complexities. Variants like remote geography, disease burden, and economic backgrounds, to name a few. Where there is a complexity, law of entropy shines. Shannon entropy is successfully utilized by countries like Iran, Turkey, and Greece to address the inequities in healthcare delivery by allocating and utilizing existing resources more efficiently. Truly a remarkable tribute to human mind how an obscure 18th century physicist from Austria and 21st century brilliant mathematician from MIT can help humanity by discovering the hidden laws of nature. Thank you for listening. You can read in my book further. Science is not a subject, science must be a lifestyle.
That is the entropy. I'm going to talk just one more thing I wanted to show you. Very quick, a couple of slides. There's actually what the entropy is, Dr. Kenneth Nepple. This is there was a entropy and information is a very strangely connected. There is a Maxwell demon. It's called. A lot of people claim there is a free energy. I tell you always there is a very skeptical. I was skeptical as a physicist. So the Maxwell demon demonstrates the skepticism of the free energy. There's a demon there sitting down there in a box. If the fast moving particles create a heat and the slow moving particle creates a cold, the cold temperatures. So devil sitting on the top and put a door, and is a thought experiment. What it does is it moves all the fast moving particles to the left, to the right side, and the left side moving all the particles to the left side. So you can cook food in the right side, doing anything, and then you can store the food on the left side. So free energy. Oh, everybody thought it's an excellent is a free energy. But there is a problem that they didn't recognize. That demon needs to, whenever it puts the store the information, it has to store the information in the brain. Whether when it's storing the information or erasing the information, it spends energy. That is a 0.0175 electron volts is actually mathematical constant, is a Landau limit is called. So every time you store energy, anything that you store information, it is bit by bit, it does that. So if there is no free energy, he is spending energy from it in the brain. That's what it is. That's why you got to eat. Even devil needs some food. So knowledge and entropy are, if the knowledge goes up, entropy goes down. Ignorance goes up, the entropy goes up. So that entropy idiots I call. So what is information? Least number of bits, letters needed to convey the message. That is a Shannon entropy. He gave a very mathematical formula. But computers, you have a 1 bit per symbol, 0 or 1. That's a 1 bit. In the LLM's language, A, B, C, D, E, F, this language, English language, you need a 4.7 bits information to convey each letter. That was that's the first publication by Shannon. The Claude Shannon did that actually. So that's the reason English has the lowest entropy. English language. That's why Twitter is so famous. You cannot put a Twitter in my language. Impossible. Because one letter missing, you cannot understand. So English is the lowest entropy. That's why English is very popular in the Twitter side. So Twitter is very popular because of the low entropy. So I actually, these EMR companies keep on changing. Some EMR companies, I don't want to, they're changing the versions. What the entropy says that every time you change the versions, you are increasing the complexity. There's a technical debt goes up, complexity goes up. It becomes an overload. EMR chaos comes there. Information is lost. There's no more information. I can see that actually some of the EMRs did that. Increase the complexity, the core function is lost, pressure in the workstations, a lot of burnouts that happen to because of that reason. So keep it simple. You don't need. So this is a entropy is a problem for everything. LLMs have the entropy problem. Entropy as a entropy of LLM is 15.6 bits per each 50,000 tokens. Predictive tokens. You say I put a sentence. The next sentence, next letter or next word should be that LLM is a entropy predictive uncertainty connected with the tokens. The token as a entropy that is 15.6. If the what happens if the entropy goes beyond 15.6? It throws up all the gibberish and crazy stuff. Even LLMs are not protected in that way. So that's why you can do from entropy algorithms, you can do acoustic sounds. The machine learning language can learn the newborn cry diagnostics. You can learn ODS, hyperthyroidism or autism spectrum by listening to the crowds. Yeah, I can listen to it. And then with the Shannon entropy, you can do that. Very amazing. The second one is the thief in Michigan happened actually. He was convicted. The entropy algorithm, the information is missing. Touch DNA came from the entropy information system. It filled up the gaps in between, and it convicted the guy who was stealing some shoes everywhere. Shoe store. It was a real case. So second law of thermodynamics convicted him in the entropy. Convicted him. Information is a entropy. We use the entropy to fill up that information because entropy is still uses the natural language. So the thought is information. In the last days of our universe, universe is expanding, and it dies. At the end, it dies. That's according to one rule, at least one thesis, one theory. But at the last days of the universe, the humans, if they survive, they have to be in the cryogenic spot because every time they think about anything, you're spending the energy. You're throwing a heat. Once it is heat, the entropy goes up, and then the universe will die. So what they're going to do, the universe is for fun sake. I did that. It is they are going to put in the cryogenics. They may get up on their birthday, and then rest of the days they're cryogenics. They cannot think. So that is the entropy is very strange relationship. So thank you for watching. I'll bring Dr. Nepple back and see what he says. What do you think of the entropy, Doctor?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting to think about sort of that analogy, and I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that data is chaotic, in the EHR, but there are times that it feels like that,
Yeah.
in trying to figure out, what exists, and so sort of those two panes where you could separate, the hot and the cold, kind of makes me think about if we have the system that can pull in, okay, this is the clinical notes, these are the labs, these are the imaging. And so if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, well, what's the limiting factor for what you can do in your practice? It was really time. And so we would try to multiply, my time or my colleagues' time by extending and say, we're going to add, advanced practice providers and PAs and nurse practitioners to work with you. I think the residents definitely, multiply what we're able to do, and we learn from them. But, I think what my experience has been with some of these AI tools is it actually can create time out of nowhere, where you didn't think it would previously exist. And I'll have that experience now where it'll be a really complex patient, but I feel like I've got all the information I need pretty darn quickly to where you're just kind of fast forwarding some of that chart prep time, and you're increasing the amount of time you can actually spend, talking with the patient. But at the end of the experience, I occasionally feel kind of weird because I haven't been sitting in that patient's chart looking through all of their records, to find information. And so, I think that at the end of the day, you really have the ability to sort of increase, and maybe people will talk about 10x output. I'm not sure that's going to happen in healthcare, but I need know what I do and what I've been able to do personally, and there's definitely sort of an X multiplier there once you get familiar with the system. And then I think it's almost been like a slingshot where, because we have working with some of these groups, and evidently folks with some other custom tools, sort of advanced features, can you ask the chart a question, which it turns out you can. And then as soon as I did that, I said, well, now can I list my questions and save them so I don't have to type it in every time? Or can I create my own AI, custom summaries? And that's actually, had an impact on day-to-day life. And real practical example, had a patient cancel surgery, or we had to cancel surgery because they didn't hold their GLP-1 medication. They hadn't done a clear liquid diet for 24 hours. And so I had maybe heard about that rule from anesthesia one time, and then I probably forgotten it. And there's no way I can recognize all those GLP-1 medications. Well, I thought about this and said, hey, can I make a prompt, sort of a safe for surgery prompt, and include in there, put in a table if a patient's on a GLP-1 medication. And so I actually had a patient today. The resident did a great job, seeing them and doing all of their pre-op, discussion. And I can look at my little custom table and recognize, oh, this patient's on a GLP-1 medication. And
That
so
is beautiful.
boom, I can talk to that patient. And then the nice thing is the nurse had already told them. So we have an even better system, which is our nurses are amazing. But in that situation, I could reiterate, oh, this is the importance of doing this clear liquid diet so that we don't end up canceling your case on the day of surgery. And so I don't have to go out and be like, oh, I've got to learn the name of all these medications. I can, to date, trust that the computer system is going to, identify those. And if there was a time when it didn't identify one, then I have a team I could feed back and say, oh, it missed this, can you fix this? And so, and you start to iterate and say, well, then locally, could we load our anesthesia guidelines for different medications into the system, that we could have a custom sort of Iowa output. And so there's a perioperative quality and safety group. We're starting to talk about that and what those type of tools would look like. And so that's my own little example of one situation where that had a significant impact on that patient when we canceled their surgery versus we kind of avoid that entirely. And so you can multiply that specific use case, times 1,000 across the institution, because, I personally have 10 or 15 different really specific prompts where I know this is the information that I potentially overlook sometimes, or I want to save my time in getting out of the chart. And, if I have my 15 things, well, the next doctor over, or the nurse, or whoever, can also create, well, what's their top 10 things that they want to, have sort of automated to pull out. And the reality is, like, in an academic environment or any environment, I'm supervising, residents, and they do a great job, but I'm still taking a look and saying, okay, is this note right? Is there some aspect of this that we need to edit? And so I just feel the same way with the AI, and so I don't need the AI to tell me how I should treat this kidney mass. I know how to do that, but I need it to show me kind of that Donald Rumsfeld, like you got to at the beginning, the known knowns and the unknown unknowns. Like, I feel pretty comfortable if I know there's a problem. I have some things medically or surgically that I can think about to, try to minimize the risk of a complication related to a problem. But I spend as much time worrying about, well, what are the unknowns that I don't even know? Has this patient have some medical history or on some medication, that is going to impact things? So I think, that I know, number one, that you have way better video editing skills than I will ever have. And so a pat on the back for that. But I think, everything, or many of the things you're talking about in that video are applicable to healthcare. And how do we decrease the complexity so that we're all kind of in our, sweet spot, or hitting that sort of, I don't normally think about flow state in clinic, because all the time you're running into roadblocks historically, versus if I've got the information I need at my fingertips, well, then I can run with that. And so
Dr.
I think
Nepple,
that's where these tools have promise. So thank you.
Dr. Nepple, you shed a light on a very, you gave a confidence to your fellow physicians, and, you gave a very positive light about the AI. And then we clearly demonstrated where you can save time, and you can save a really clear picture about the saving patient's life, and some of the procedures you can save. That is the cost savings. You demonstrate all three. I'm really, thank you so much. It's truly an honor and a privilege to talk with you. It's a really, you gave us a very clear path that AI's the role in the particularly in urology or in general in medicine and overall healthcare. Thank you so much, sir. It is truly an honor.
Well, thanks so much for reaching out and for this service that you're providing. I'm just starting to work through the video archives and starting to learn things with each of those. So appreciate the invitation, and I think it's really an exciting time, to be in not only in medicine but in whatever you're doing, to think about how the tools are changing to help us be better.
Thank you, sir. If you can hang around after the podcast, I will talk with you a couple of minutes. Thank you so much, all. Good night, all of you. Good night, all of you.
We are retelling their stories through our patented designs that can be worn on scrubs, t-shirts, printed on conference bags, and endless other promotional materials. Daily Wear for Medicine is the first ever of its kind to create curiosity in medicine through visual art. We at MedBricks are celebrating unsung heroes of the past who made enormous contributions to the field of medicine through our unique campaign called Daily Wear for Medicine. You can wear it, carry it, and give it.